Hi, I'm Rena from Quilt Israel, and here we are back again with our next block in our quilt along, and this one is called the Balkan puzzle. And the cool thing about this block is that it uses only half square triangles. I chose this block specifically to show how to make both 4 at a time and 8 at a time half square triangles, as well as how to sew together a 12 patch. There's, in general, in the different methods for making the half square triangles, there's a bit of math involved if you want to get a specific size. I am making some quilting calculators on my website. They're not there yet. They should be there soon. As soon as they are, I will put a link in the description box, and I'll let you guys know. So let's get started.
So here we are at the cutting table. I've already cut up my pieces. The block pattern is 4 by 4 squares. Because we want a finished block of 12 inches, if we divide 12 by 4, we get 3 inches. 3 inches means 3.5 unfinished, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. So what we need is a 3.5 inch square. That's what we're aiming for. The fabric that I chose for my Balkan puzzle is canary yellow as my center diamond. The star points I'm going to do in jade. And my background fabric is dove. The triangles that go in the corner are foxglove pink. In order to get a 3-inch finished square, we need to cut out a 5 3/4 inch square. These are going to be for the 4 at a time half square triangles. Here I'm going to pair them up. I'm pairing up the canary with the jade star points, and I'm going to pair up the background fabric with the other star points. For the 8 at a time method, we need 8-inch squares. From that, we need the pink and the background. They are the triangles that sit outside the star. We are going to be pairing each of the squares. For the 4 at a time method, the fabric doesn't need to be marked. We just need to sew a 1/4 inch around the whole block. But for the 8 at a time method, we need to mark the squares. Match up the top and bottom corners with the ruler and draw a line from the top corner to the bottom corner. Rotate the block 90 degrees and do the same thing from the other corners. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam on each side of the lines that I just drew for the 8 at a time method.
So here we are at the sewing machine, and it's time to sew our pieces together. I'm using solid color, so it doesn't matter which side goes on which because they're both the same. If you're using a pattern fabric, what you're going to do is put the pretty sides together, and these should be the backs of each. So this is for the 4 at a time method. We just line up our fabric, and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way around. The first square is sewn. We have our 4 at a time triangle sewn. So for our 8 at a time, what we're going to do is sew a 1/4 inch on each side of the marked line. Now that everything is all sewn, it's time to take it to the cutting board. So we can start with our 4 at a time method. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take our ruler and cut from corner to corner in both directions. If you have a rotating mat, this is like a really good place to use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it
I find it, if you set it at a corner of a table, that also works, where you can just cut from either side. So this is this way from corner to corner. And I'm not going to move it. I'm just going to lift up my ruler. And I'm going to put it the other direction. And I'm going to make a second slice. And here we have 4 beautiful half square triangles. Okay, we're going to square those up in a minute. I'll just cut the other 4. The other 4. Now we have our 8 at a time half square triangles to cut. And so what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across, top down, and then afterwards I'm going to cut on each of the marked lines. What I'm doing here is I'm aiming for the center point of where I drew. Without moving anything, I'm going to pick it up, flip it over. Once again, aim for the center. And now, oops, I'll just scoot this back together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice on the actual drawn lines. And here we have 2, 4, 6, 8. The next thing is to square them up, press them open, and sew them all together. So here I have all of my half square triangle. These 2, we have 4 of each. This one, we have 8 of them. I already took the liberty of pressing them to the dark side on all the pieces. I also spent some time cutting off my dogtails, which are the little triangles that just hang out at the edges, just to make that all faster. I pressed these all to the dark side, but I'm probably going to manipulate them. I'll repress them a little bit to make sure that the seams nest correctly. I'll show you what I mean as we go along, but just to give you like a little heads up. Okay, so now I'm going to build the block, and it can get a little confusing because this is a 12 patch. It's much easier, obviously, with a 4 patch and a 9 patch, but this is a 12 patch block. So what I like to do is I like to start in the middle. So I'm going to place, this makes a nice square or diamond in the middle. I'm going to start there. And then after that, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do these pieces. These, when I was looking at it, the block, these are parallel. These 2 lines here are parallel. So on each one of the sides, we put a block parallel, and the side of this side and the side of the diamond are parallel to each other. So I'm just going to try to keep, that'll help me just keep everything straight in there. So we have all those down, and so the next are the 8 at a kind.
And the 8 of a kind, they look like sort of like flying geese. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place them, and they're flying geese that are pointing towards the blue. So that just gives me just another thing to work with when I'm building the block. So not to, because like I could do it this way and that'd be a different block. But for this block, we want it to point towards the center, towards the flying geese are flying towards the block. Okay, so all my blocks are placed. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look where the points come together, like over here. These 2 points come together, and right now, if you look at the backs, they're both pressed. They're both pressed in the same direction. So in order to get them to nest, I'm going to go and I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to press it actually the opposite direction. Okay, and so now when I go to sew these together, get this, what I'll get is these 2 seams over here will be nice and nested. The points will now match when I sew it across. So I'm just going to go through. In this one, it's not all of them. It's only a few. So for instance, I'm not going to bother repressing this because it doesn't matter. Over here also, it's over here, these 2 match. So let's repress one of them. So now these 2 will nest when these are sewn together. This is okay, and this. So it's basically the 4 corners. Okay. All right. The more blocks you have, the more confusing it can get. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pin them on the side that gets sewn. I'm not just in order to take it to the sewing machine so that I don't get turned around while I'm sewing. I'm doing it quickly. I'm not really trying to match anything up. I'll do that when I'm at the sewing machine. These are all squares and it's easy to turn them around and come up with a different block. I'm not saying a bad block, just a different block than you were expecting. I'm going to sew this side, I'm going to sew this side, and then I'm going to sew the 2 sides together, and only afterwards I'm going to sew across. Okay, so now that I'm at the sewing machine, what I'm going to do is I am going to take out my pin to start with. I'm going to line it all up. I'm going to make sure that my seams are nesting at the bottom. And I can even, if I'm worried about it all moving around, I can give a pin at the bottom just where the seams nest. And I'm going to line up the corners and I'm going to sew. Okay. I'm just going to go and I'm going to do the same thing with all the pieces, and I'm just going to chain piece them all together. I'm going to do the same thing with the second row. Okay, now I'm just making sure everything makes sense. All of these are going to be nested seams. I didn't iron them correctly. So what I can do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay all of them on top of each other. I'm just going to force one side to nest. And now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. This is like a good example of why it's important to pin, like to delineate your side. So even though these are connected and I know that these two go together, because I know that the pin is here, I know to flip it over and to sew on this side. I iron towards the left for the first row, the right the second row, the left, and the right again. You could do the opposite, left, right, left, as long as that the sides are opposing. Now I have over here also points that I have to care about. So what I'm going to do here is there's a lot of bulk here because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of fabric going together. So this is, in this kind of a case, I'm definitely going to pin just to make sure that this point and this point match. I will pin here on this and on all the edges. On this side I can see where the point is. I'll go through the point over here and the point over here, and that will help me match them. And I have these seams, the other seams, the seams between the blocks nesting. If you're finding it difficult to work with all the fabric that's hanging off, you can cut it so you're working with less. I like to keep it on just so that I keep everything straight. Over here, I want to go through the top, about 1/4 inch down. I want to see where it ends here. And then right like that. And the last nested seam. And now I'm going to sew this row together. As I'm sewing, I'm aiming for the point where there's like a crosshairs at the top here. For here where I can't see the crosshairs, I'm aiming for where I know the pin went in. And I have very, very, very nice points. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So here we are done with our Balkan puzzle block. We made both 8 at a time and 4 at a time half square triangles. I really love half square triangles. There's just so much you can do with them. Either in other blocks or on their own, you can make amazing patterns. I hope you enjoy making them as much as I do. If you found this video useful, please click on the playlist over here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.